My name is Amber Mitchell, and I'm 22 years old. I always imagined my college graduation would be the proudest day of my parents' lives. The decorations were perfect, the food was exquisite, and everyone was smiling except my parents. Behind their plastic smiles, something dark was brewing. When they handed me that special celebratory drink, their eyes held no warmth. "A toast to our graduate," my father said, but the way my mother whispered finally sent chills down my spine. I never imagined they'd go this far. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below and hit subscribe to hear how I discovered my own parents tried to poison me at my graduation party. Growing up in our pristine colonial house in Brookline, a wealthy Boston suburb, should have been idyllic. The manicured lawn, the white picket fence, the BMW and Mercedes parked in the driveway. From the outside, the Mitchells were the picture of upper-middle-class success. My father, Harold Mitchell, was a business executive who specialized in corporate acquisitions, while my mother, Sylvia, maintained her interior design business catering to the elite of Boston society. Our home was frequently featured in local magazines as a model of sophisticated living, but those glossy pages never captured the coldness that permeated every room. From my earliest memories, nothing I did was ever quite good enough. When I brought home an A- in second grade, my father didn't congratulate me, he asked why it wasn't an A+. When I won second place in the state science fair in 8th grade, my mother's only comment was, "Second place is the first loser." They weren't just strict, they were impossible to please. Their obsession with status defined our family dynamic. Every achievement was measured not by personal growth, but by how it reflected on the Mitchell name. My parents hosted dinner parties where they'd parade me around like a show pony, making me recite my academic accomplishments to their impressed guests. Behind closed doors, they'd pick apart every social interaction, criticizing my posture, my diction, even the way I laughed. "Stand up straight, Amber. The Williamsons were watching you slouch." Don't use that common expression. It makes you sound uneducated. Why would you mention your interest in public health? Medicine or law are the only acceptable professions for a Mitchell. By high school, I had developed an internal algorithm for navigating their expectations. Perfect grades, prestigious extracurriculars, the right friends from the right families. I became student body president, captained the debate team, and volunteered at the hospital, not because I was passionate about these activities, but because they looked good on college applications. And college applications were everything to Harold and Sylvia Mitchell. When the acceptance letters started rolling in, my parents dismissed every school that wasn't Ivy League, regardless of the strength of the programs. I had set my heart on Northwestern University's biochemistry program, one of the best in the country, but my parents called it settling. Northwestern. My father scoffed over dinner the night I received my acceptance packet. Why even apply there when you could go to Harvard? What I couldn't tell him was that I had applied to Northwestern specifically because it wasn't Harvard. It represented my first real choice, something that was mine, not theirs. The real breaking point came when I received a full academic scholarship to Northwestern. Instead of being proud, my parents were furious. "We've been saving for an Ivy League education your entire life," my mother hissed during the argument that followed. "This is how you repay us?" "By throwing away opportunities we've worked so hard to provide." I couldn't make them understand that the scholarship was an achievement, not a rejection of their plans. The financial aid package would cover tuition, room, and board, a significant accomplishment that most parents would celebrate. "We don't need financial aid," my father said dismissively. "It's embarrassing. People will think we can't afford to send you to college." That was the moment I realized they cared more about appearances than about my success or happiness. Their reaction to my scholarship was the first crack in the foundation of obligation I'd built my life on. During this turbulent time, Kayla Thompson became my lifeline. We'd been friends since freshman year of high school, bonding over AP chemistry and a shared love of true crime podcasts. Kayla came from a warm, supportive family who invited me for dinner whenever tensions at home became unbearable. Her parents attended every school event, proudly displaying her B-plus papers on their refrigerator and celebrating her decision to attend the state university on a partial scholarship. "Your parents are just different," Kayla would say diplomatically when I'd show up at her house after another argument. Not everyone shows love the same way. But even Kayla couldn't fully understand the psychological warfare that defined my home life. The constant criticism, the emotional manipulation, the withdrawal of affection whenever I failed to meet impossible standards, these were the invisible wounds I carried. Despite their objections, I accepted the Northwestern scholarship. My parents reluctantly agreed to cover my remaining expenses, but made it clear they considered it an investment they expected returns on. "This better lead to medical school," my father warned as he drove me to the airport. "We're not spending money for you to waste your potential." College became my escape. For the first time, I was hundreds of miles away from their scrutiny. I could choose my own classes, make my own friends, and explore my own interests without constant judgment. I thrived in Northwestern's challenging academic environment, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while discovering my passion for biochemistry and toxicology. During my sophomore year, I secured a prestigious internship at Meridian Pharmaceuticals, working under Dr. Eliza Fernandez, a pioneering researcher in antidotes for rare poisons. The internship was unpaid, but the experience was invaluable. When I called home to share the news, my mother's first question wasn't about what I'd be learning, but rather, if it's unpaid, how does this benefit us? That summer, I stayed on campus to continue my research rather than returning home. My parents called it a betrayal of family values. I called it self-preservation. By junior year, I had built a new support system. Besides Kayla, who visited me twice a semester, I had formed close friendships with my roommate Jasmine and several classmates in the biochemistry program. And then there was Derek Wilson. I met Derek in an advanced organic chemistry lab where we were paired as lab partners. He was brilliant, kind, and came from a working-class family in Michigan. His father was a factory worker and his mother a nurse, and they had sacrificed everything to help him become the first person in his family to attend college. Derek was attending Northwestern on a combination of scholarships and student loans, working part-time at the campus library to cover his living expenses. When I introduced Derek to my parents over video chat, their disapproval was immediate and palpable. My mother ended the call early, claiming a headache. My father sent an email the following day expressing his concerns about Derek's limited prospects and reminding me that Mitchells have standards to uphold. Their reaction only strengthened my resolve to forge my own path. With each semester that passed, I grew more confident in my abilities and more detached from my parents' toxic influence. By the time senior year arrived, I knew I would never be the daughter they wanted, and I was finally okay with that. Senior year passed in a blur of lab work, research papers, and job interviews. By April, I had secured a position at Vertex Pharmaceuticals in Boston, a role that perfectly aligned with my interests in biochemical research and offered an impressive starting salary. I had also been accepted to several graduate programs, but decided to gain industry experience first. My GPA was perfect. I had co-authored 2 research papers with Dr. Fernandez, and I was selected to give a speech at the departmental graduation ceremony. When I called my parents to share these accomplishments, their response was predictably lukewarm. "Boston's an expensive city," my father commented after a brief congratulation. "That salary won't go far." "At least you'll be closer to home," my mother added. "Though I don't know why you couldn't have done all this at Harvard in the first place." Despite their reaction, I was determined to celebrate my achievements. I had worked hard for 4 years and wanted to mark the occasion with a proper graduation party. Since I would be returning to Boston for my new job, I thought it would be nice to host the celebration at my parents' home, a chance to bring together my college friends and hometown connections. I was thinking of inviting about 30 people, I explained during a phone call with my mother. "Just close friends, a few professors who are traveling east anyway, and family members." There was a pause on the line. 30 people is a lot, Amber. And we wouldn't know most of them. "That's the point, Mom. It's a chance for you to meet the people who have been important to me these past 4 years." Well, she said with a sigh that communicated volumes of disapproval, your father and I will need to discuss this. The next day, my father called. Your mother and I have decided we'll host your graduation party, he announced, as if bestowing a great favor. But we'll need to make some adjustments to your plans. Those adjustments turned out to be a complete takeover. They changed the date to accommodate my father's business associates, moved the venue from our backyard to the Brookline Country Club, and took control of the guest list. My modest celebration was transformed into a society event with over 100 guests, most of whom I barely knew. We've invited the Harringtons, my mother informed me, referring to family friends whose daughter had graduated from Yale. And the Blakemores, their son just made partner at Goldman Sachs. But what about my friends? What about Derek and Kayla? I asked. We've allocated 20 spots for your college acquaintances, she replied dismissively. Just send me their names and contact information. I tried to protest, but it was futile. Every suggestion I made was either ignored or overruled. They selected the menu without consulting me, choosing elaborate seafood dishes despite knowing I preferred simpler food. They hired a string quartet instead of allowing me to create a playlist. They even chose my outfit, a conservative blue dress that my mother deemed appropriate, but that looked nothing like my usual style. This isn't my party anymore, I complained to Kayla during one of our late-night calls. It's like they're using my graduation as an excuse to network. Then take it back, Kayla suggested. It's your accomplishment, not theirs. But asserting myself against my parents had never been simple. Every attempt at independence was met with emotional manipulation or financial threats. When I suggested scaling back the party, my father reminded me how much money they had already invested in the venue and catering. After all we've spent on your education, you'd deny us this one opportunity to celebrate with our friends, he asked, masterfully twisting my reasonable request into an act of ingratitude. To make matters worse, they seemed determined to exclude Derek from the celebration. They accidentally sent his invitation to the wrong address, then claimed there wasn't room for him at the family table. When I insisted he be seated with me, they reluctantly agreed but made their disapproval clear. I don't understand what you see in him, my mother said during a dress fitting that she had insisted on. He has no connections, no family background. What can he possibly offer you? He offers kindness, respect, and support, I replied, meeting her gaze in the mirror. 3 things that have been in short supply in my life. The color drained from her face, and she left the room without another word. I immediately regretted the outburst. Not because it wasn't true, but because I knew there would be consequences. 2 days before I was set to fly home for graduation, I overheard a conversation that confirmed my worst suspicions about my parents' motives. I had called to confirm some last-minute details, and my father had apparently forgotten to disconnect the call after we finished speaking. Wasted so much money on her education, I heard him say to my mother, his voice distant but audible. For years at that overpriced school, and what do we have to show for it? A job she could have gotten with connections from Harvard. At least she's coming back to Boston, my mother replied. We can still guide her towards suitable opportunities. And suitable partners. If she thinks we're going to welcome that scholarship boy into our family, she's delusional. A Mitchell marrying into that kind of background? It would undo everything we've worked for. I hung up, my hands shaking with anger and hurt. Despite years of their conditional love, part of me had still hoped that deep down, they were proud of me. That hope now felt foolish. The night before graduation, Derek found me crying in our favorite study spot at the library. I don't want to go home, I admitted, showing him the transcript of the conversation I'd typed out while it was fresh in my memory. I don't want to pretend everything is fine for the sake of appearances. Derek read the messages, his expression darkening. Then don't pretend, he said finally. You've spent your whole life trying to earn their approval. Maybe it's time to decide if that's still worth pursuing. He was right, of course. But facing my parents' disapproval was one thing. Facing it publicly, surrounded by their friends and associates, was another challenge entirely. Still, as I packed my bags for the flight to Boston, I made a promise to myself. This would be the last time I compromised my happiness for their approval. I just didn't realize how dangerous that resolution would become. The day of the party arrived with picture-perfect weather, sunny with a gentle breeze that rustled the expensive decorations adorning my parents' backyard. My mother had eventually abandoned the country club idea after realizing she could better showcase their home with an outdoor celebration. Professional event planners had transformed our garden into something from a magazine spread. White tents with flowing fabric, crystal chandeliers hanging from tree branches, and centerpieces featuring exotic orchids imported specifically for the occasion. The catering staff bustled around, setting up stations for the raw bar, carving table, and champagne fountain, none of which reflected my tastes or preferences. Everything screamed wealth and status, from the hand-calligraphed place cards to the gold-rimmed china. It wasn't a celebration of my achievement. It was a monument to my parents' social aspirations. "What do you think?" my mother asked as she led me through the setup, her tone suggesting only one acceptable answer. "It's very elegant," I replied diplomatically, though it's a bit more formal than I had envisioned. She ignored my subtle criticism. "The Astors will be seated near us at the main table, along with the Whitmores and the Crawfords. I've put your boyfriend at table 3 with some of your cousins." "Derek should be at the main table with me," I insisted, prepared for this battle. "He's important to me, and this is supposedly my celebration." My mother's smile tightened. "We've already printed the place cards, Amber. Don't be difficult, not today." Before I could respond, the first guests began to arrive. My father emerged from the house in an expensive new suit, suddenly transforming into the proud, doting father I had never actually experienced. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders for the benefit of arriving guests, his grip just a little too tight to be affectionate. "There's our graduate," he boomed to the Harriman family as they approached. "Northwestern's brightest biochemist." We couldn't be prouder. I plastered on a smile that matched his insincerity, playing my part in the charade. This was their performance, and I was merely a supporting actor. As more guests arrived, I found myself constantly introduced as our daughter, the biochemist, or our Northwestern graduate, as if my accomplishments were family property rather than the result of my own hard work. Each introduction was accompanied by subtle reminders of my parents' contribution. "We always knew Amber would excel in science," my mother told Mrs. Crawford, a college friend of hers. "We started her with a junior chemistry set when she was just 5. The truth was that my aunt had given me that chemistry set, and my parents had discouraged me from using it because the experiments were too messy for our pristine home. The arrival of my actual support system provided welcome relief from the pretense. Kayla arrived first, immediately seeing through the facade and squeezing my hand supportively. "Wow, this is something," she whispered as she surveyed the elaborate setup. "Are those ice sculptures of your university buildings?" Apparently, subtlety wasn't on the menu, I whispered back, grateful for her presence. Derek arrived shortly after, looking handsome but uncomfortable in a new suit he had purchased specifically for the occasion. My mother greeted him with a cold kiss on the cheek, while my father gave him a handshake that was more intimidation than welcome. "So, Derek," my father said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "Amber tells us you're still considering your options after graduation. Any concrete plans yet?" The implication that Derek was directionless was both deliberate and false. He had already accepted a position in a medical research facility and would be starting medical school in the fall. "Actually, sir, I'll be working at Massachusetts General Hospital's research department while attending Harvard Medical School," Derek replied evenly. "I was fortunate to receive the Gilman Fellowship, which covers my tuition." My father's expression flickered with surprise before he recovered. "Harvard, you say? Well, that's unexpected." The subtle insult wasn't lost on Derek, but he maintained his composure. He had dealt with my parents' condescension before and had developed an admirable immunity to it. The one genuinely happy reunion came when my mother's brother, Uncle Travis, arrived. Unlike his sister, Travis had always shown me unconditional support. He had attended my high school graduation when my parents were too busy with work commitments, had sent care packages to me at college, and had been the only family member to visit me at Northwestern. "There's my favorite niece," he exclaimed, wrapping me in a bear hug. "Northwestern's loss is Boston's gain." I'm so proud of you, kiddo. Uncle Travis had never married or had children, instead pouring his affection into his role as the fun uncle. My mother often criticized his career as a wildlife photographer as unstable and unsuitable for a Chapman, her maiden name, but I had always admired his courage to follow his passion. "This party is a bit much, isn't it?" he whispered as we broke apart. "Your mom always did have a flair for the excessive." I laughed for what felt like the first time that day. "You have no idea. Wait until you see the ice sculpture of Northwestern Science Building." As the celebration continued, I made my rounds, introducing Derek and Kayla to extended family members and reconnecting with high school friends. My former chemistry teacher, Mr. Hansen, attended briefly, genuinely pleased to see how far I had come since his class. Two of my professors who lived in the Boston area also made appearances, much to my delight. The carefully orchestrated event progressed according to my parents' minute-by-minute schedule. Cocktails were served precisely at 4:00 p.m., followed by my father's welcome speech at 4:30. Dinner began at 5 o'clock, with the servers moving in choreographed precision to deliver the five-course meal. At 6:15, right on schedule, my father clinked his glass and announced it was time for speeches. He spoke first, delivering a polished address about the Mitchell legacy of excellence and how proud they were of our daughter's continuation of family traditions. He mentioned my achievements only in relation to how they reflected on the family, never acknowledging the personal growth or passion that had driven me. My mother followed with equally impersonal remarks, focusing mainly on thanking their friends for attending and making a joke about how they could finally convert my bedroom into the home gym they had always wanted. A comment that drew laughs from their friends, but pained looks from mine. When it was my turn to speak, I abandoned the bland, grateful speech I had prepared and instead spoke from the heart. "Thank you all for coming today," I began, looking at the faces around me. Especially those who supported me throughout my college journey, my friends, my professors, my boyfriend Derek, and my Uncle Travis. I saw my mother stiffen at the omission of her and my father from this list. These past 4 years have taught me more than just biochemistry. They've taught me about independence, about finding my voice, and about choosing my own path. Northwestern wasn't my parents' first choice for me, but it was mine, and I'm grateful every day that I had the courage to make that decision. I continued, acknowledging specific people who had made a difference in my life: Kayla's unwavering friendship, Derek's love and support, Dr. Fernandez's mentorship, Uncle Travis's encouragement. With each name, I could see my parents growing increasingly uncomfortable, their smiles becoming more strained. As I prepare to start my career in Boston, I'm bringing with me not just a degree, but the confidence to make my own choices and the wisdom to surround myself with people who support those choices, I concluded, raising my glass. To authentic connections and genuine support, may we all be fortunate enough to experience them. The toast received enthusiastic applause from my friends and puzzled looks from my parents' social circle, who seemed to sense the subtext but couldn't quite place what was wrong. My father quickly stood to redirect attention, announcing that dessert would be served on the terrace. As guests migrated toward the dessert station, I noticed my mother drinking more heavily than usual, her practiced smile slipping when she thought no one was watching. My father maintained his composure, but kept shooting me warning glances across the garden. I was engaged in conversation with my undergraduate advisor when I noticed my parents huddled in a corner of the yard, whispering intensely while occasionally glancing in my direction. Their body language was tense, my mother's gestures becoming more animated as my father nodded grimly. A sense of unease settled over me. I had expected them to be displeased with my speech, but something about their secretive conference suggested a reaction beyond mere annoyance. When they abruptly ended their discussion and approached me with renewed smiles, alarm bells rang in my mind. "Amber, darling," my mother called, her voice artificially bright. "Your father and I would like a word with you in the kitchen. Just a small graduation surprise we've been saving." As I excused myself from my conversation and followed them into the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something dangerous. I just didn't realize how literally true that instinct would prove to be. The kitchen was eerily quiet compared to the festive noise outside. Caterers had been instructed to use the side entrance, leaving the main kitchen, with its gleaming marble countertops and professional-grade appliances, pristine and empty. My parents stood side by side near the island, their postures rigid and unwelcoming despite the smiles fixed on their faces. "Close the door, Amber," my father instructed, his voice carrying that dangerous calmness I recognized from childhood. The tone that preceded his worst punishments. I left it slightly ajar, unwilling to be completely isolated with them. "What's this about?" My mother's smile tightened. "That speech was inappropriate, Amber. After everything we've done for you, the sacrifices we've made, you publicly embarrassed us in front of our friends and colleagues." "Embarrassed you?" "By thanking the people who actually supported me." "Don't be obtuse," my father cut in. "You deliberately excluded us while praising that boyfriend of yours and your uncle, who, may I remind you, has accomplished nothing of note in his entire life." "Uncle Travis has accomplished plenty," I defended. "He's published 3 books of photography and has a gallery showing next month. Just because he didn't choose a corporate career doesn't mean—" "This isn't about Travis," my mother interrupted, her voice rising. "This is about your ingratitude. For years of tuition, room, and board." "I had a full scholarship," I reminded her. "Which didn't cover everything," she snapped. "Do you have any idea how much we've spent on you? The opportunities we've created? The connections we've fostered? And this is how you repay us, by making us look like uninvolved parents." My father stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You've been nothing but a drain on our resources from the day you were born. Everything we've given you. The education, the opportunities, this party, all investments we expected returns on. But instead of appreciating our efforts, you fought us at every turn." "Returns," I repeated, stunned by his characterization. "I'm your daughter, not a stock portfolio." "You're an ungrateful leech," my mother hissed, abandoning all pretense of affection. "You're just a leech who's been sucking us dry for 22 years. The naked hostility in her voice shocked me into silence. I had always known they were disappointed in me, but the pure venom in her tone suggested something deeper, something that went beyond typical parental disapproval. My father turned to the counter, where a single crystal glass stood filled with a pale blue liquid. "We had planned to make a private toast, just the 3 of us, to your future," he said, his voice suddenly artificially light again. "A special graduation cocktail I've been saving for this occasion." He lifted the glass, which contained what appeared to be a blue curacao mixture, but something about the color seemed off, too opaque, with an unusual tinge that my trained eye couldn't help but notice. "It's a unique blend," he continued, extending the glass toward me. "Something to mark this transition in your life." For years of biochemistry and toxicology training set off immediate alarms in my head. The color wasn't quite right for any standard cocktail, and my father, who prided himself on his home bartending skills, would never serve something that looked so amateur unless there was a reason. I took the glass hesitantly, pretending to examine it appreciatively while actually scrutinizing its contents. When I lifted it toward my nose, ostensibly to enjoy the aroma, I detected a faint bitter almond smell beneath the alcohol, a telltale sign of cyanide. My blood ran cold, but years of navigating my parents' psychological warfare had made me adept at hiding my reactions. I forced a smile, swirling the liquid in the glass while my mind raced through options. "It looks interesting," I said, stalling. "What's in it?" "Family secret," my father replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Drink up. To your future. Actually, would you mind if I took this outside to share the toast with Derek? He just texted me wondering where I disappeared to." My mother's face hardened. "This is a family moment, Amber. Your boyfriend can wait." "Of course," I conceded, lifting the glass to my lips, but not actually letting the liquid touch them. I tilted the glass and pretended to take a small sip, then lowered it. "It's strong. I should probably take it slow since I'll be mingling with guests all evening." My father's expression flickered with impatience. "Don't be childish, Amber. Finish your drink so we can rejoin the party." "Right, sorry," I said, pretending to take another sip while actually holding the liquid in the front of my mouth without swallowing. You know, I need to use the restroom. Too much champagne earlier. I'll be right back. Before they could object, I turned and walked briskly toward the powder room off the kitchen, closing and locking the door behind me. I immediately spat the liquid into the sink, rinsing my mouth thoroughly with water. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and texted Derek, emergency. Parents gave me suspicious drink. Smells like cyanide. Not joking. Don't react. Act normal. Meet me upstairs in 5 minutes. My old bedroom. I flushed the toilet for effect, then emerged with the glass still in hand. I think I'll take this upstairs to freshen up before rejoining everyone, I said casually. I spilled a bit on my dress. My mother stepped forward. I can take the drink while you clean up. No need, I insisted, maintaining my composure through sheer willpower. I'll just be a minute. Please, go back to the guests. They'll wonder where the hosts have gone. I could see the calculation in their eyes, causing a scene would draw attention, which was the last thing they wanted. With visible reluctance, they nodded and moved toward the back door. Don't be long, my father called after me, his tone carrying a warning. And finish your drink. It's special. Once upstairs, I locked myself in my childhood bedroom and carefully placed the glass on my old desk. My hands were trembling so badly I nearly dropped it. The room had been partially converted to a home office, but my parents had maintained enough of my original decor to present it as Amber's room, when guests visited, another part of their perfect family facade. I retrieved my portable chemical test kit from my suitcase, a graduation gift from Dr. Fernandez that I'd brought to analyze water samples for a side project. It contained basic reagents for detecting common toxins, including a simple cyanide test. When Derek quietly knocked on the door, I let him in and immediately collapsed into his arms, the full horror of the situation finally hitting me. They tried to poison me, I whispered, still unable to fully process the reality of it. My own parents actually tried to poison me. Derek held me tightly, his body tense with protective anger. Are you absolutely sure? This is beyond comprehension. I pulled back and led him to the desk where the drink sat. Smell it. Carefully, don't get too close. He leaned in slightly, then recoiled. Bitter almonds. Classic sign of cyanide, I confirmed. And look at the color, that's not normal for any cocktail. Plus, I hesitated, the words sticking in my throat. They called me a leech. Said I've been draining their resources for 22 years. This wasn't some heated argument, Derek. The way they looked at me, they meant it. I uncapped the test kit with shaking hands and carefully performed a simple test on a drop of the liquid. The reagent changed color immediately, confirming our suspicions. Positive for cyanide, I said, my voice hollow. A potentially lethal dose, based on the concentration. Derek paled, gripping the edge of the desk for support. We need to call the police. With what evidence? I asked. They'll deny everything, say I'm making it up for attention. My father has half the Boston PD at his country club. We need more proof. I took out my phone and began documenting everything: photographs of the drink, the test results, a recording of me explaining what had happened while the events were fresh. I also secured samples of the contaminated drink in several sample vials from my kit. We should get back to the party before they get suspicious, I said finally. Act normal while we figure out what to do. Derek looked at me with concern. How can you go back out there and pretend nothing happened? I laughed bitterly. I've been pretending with them my entire life. This is just one more performance. Before heading back downstairs, I hid the samples and test results in my suitcase and prepared a replacement drink that looked similar to the poison one. As we rejoined the party, I caught my parents watching us from across the lawn, their expressions unreadable except for the tightness around my mother's mouth when she noticed the drink still in my hand. I raised the glass in their direction with a forced smile before taking a deliberate sip of the safe replacement. My father nodded slightly, a gesture that might have seemed approving to others, but that I now recognized as deeply sinister. As the evening continued, I maintained the performance of my life, laughing at jokes, accepting congratulations, and pretending I hadn't just discovered my parents had attempted to murder me. But beneath the facade, my mind was racing, piecing together a pattern I had been too close to see before. The accidents throughout my childhood that had always seemed just a little too convenient. The time I had mysteriously developed food poisoning before a science competition that conflicted with my parents' social plans. The brakes on my car that had failed after I'd announced my decision to attend Northwestern instead of Harvard. What I had interpreted as controlling behavior now revealed itself as something far more malevolent. And as I circulated among guests with this horrifying new perspective, I couldn't help but wonder, what had finally pushed them from manipulation to murder? The remainder of the party passed in a surreal blur. I moved through the motions, smiling, thanking guests for coming, accepting congratulations, while my mind struggled to process the attempted murder. Derek and Kayla stayed close, creating a protective buffer between me and my parents whenever possible. By 10 o'clock, most guests had departed, leaving only family members and close friends. My parents had maintained their perfect host personas throughout the evening, though I occasionally caught them watching me with expressions that now seemed predatory rather than parental. "We need to get you somewhere safe," Derek whispered as we helped clear empty glasses from a table. "You can't stay here tonight." "I've already booked a hotel room," I replied quietly. "I told them I was staying with you, and I told Uncle Travis I was staying with my parents. No one knows where I'll actually be except you and Kayla." The protective measures felt surreal, something from a thriller novel rather than my actual life, but the weight of the poisoned drink samples in my purse was an undeniable reality. Once the last guests had departed, I made a show of yawning and announced I was meeting Kayla for a late celebration with college friends. My parents exchanged glances, but didn't protest. Their failed attempt had clearly left them uncertain how to proceed. "Don't be too late," my mother said mechanically. "We have brunch with the Harringtons tomorrow." The casual reminder of social obligations after they had just tried to kill me was so absurd I almost laughed. Instead, I nodded and kissed them both on the cheek, fighting the urge to recoil from their touch. "I'll be back late. Don't wait up." In the safety of Derek's car, I finally allowed myself to break down. The tears came in overwhelming waves, my body shaking with the delayed shock and horror of what had happened. "They really tried to kill me," I repeated, the reality still not fully registering. "My own parents." Derek drove in tense silence, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand. "We need a plan," he said finally. "This isn't something we can handle alone." At the hotel, Kayla was waiting for us, having left the party earlier to secure the room and arrange a private meeting space where we could talk freely. The concern on her face deepened as I recounted the kitchen confrontation and showed her the test results. "This is insane," she whispered, examining the sample vials. "Have they always been this evil?" "Controlling, yes. Manipulative, absolutely. But this..." I shook my head, still struggling to connect my difficult, but seemingly normal parents with people capable of attempted murder. Something must have pushed them over the edge. "Your speech," Derek suggested. "You publicly acknowledged everyone but them. In front of all their friends." "That might have been the trigger, but not the cause," I replied, thinking it through. "You don't go from strict parenting to homicide over one speech. There has to be more." We agreed that our immediate priority was gathering evidence. Without proof, it would be my word against theirs, and in their social circle, with their connections, I knew who would be believed. "I need to get back into the house," I said, formulating a plan. "There might be evidence of their motive, financial records, emails, something that explains why they suddenly decided their daughter needed to die." "That's too dangerous," Derek protested. "What if they try again?" "They think I drank the poison," I reminded him. "They'll be expecting it to take effect, not for me to come investigating. Besides, they'll be at brunch tomorrow morning. I can search the house while they're gone." After much debate, we agreed on a plan. Kayla would take me back to my parents' house early the next morning, ostensibly to pick up a forgotten item before their brunch. While they were out, I would search for evidence. Derek, meanwhile, would take the drink samples to his professor at Harvard Medical School, who specialized in toxicology and could provide an official analysis. That night, lying awake in the hotel room while Kayla slept in the adjoining bed, I tried to reconcile the parents who had raised me with the people who had tried to poison me. Had there been signs I'd missed? Were there moments when their mask had slipped, revealing the true darkness beneath? I thought of all the coincidences throughout my life, the opportunities that had mysteriously fallen through, the friends who had suddenly withdrawn without explanation, the constant monitoring of my activities under the guise of parental concern. What I had attributed to overprotective parenting now seemed sinister in retrospect. Morning came after a restless night. As planned, Kayla drove me back to my parents' house, where I found them preparing to leave for their brunch engagement. "I forgot my charger," I explained, brushing past them toward the stairs. "Don't worry about me. I'll lock up when I leave." My mother seemed about to object, but my father placed a hand on her arm. "Let her get her things, Sylvia. We're running late." The meaningful look they exchanged sent chills down my spine. They were clearly confused by my apparent health, having expected the poison to have taken effect by now. Once they had departed, I began a systematic search of the house. I started with my father's home office, carefully examining documents while ensuring everything was returned exactly as I found it. Years of living under their scrutiny had taught me to move through the house without leaving traces of my presence. The first breakthrough came when I discovered my father's laptop password on a note hidden beneath his desk blotter, a violation of cybersecurity practices that seemed oddly careless for someone so controlling. Using the password, I accessed his email and financial records, methodically documenting anything suspicious. What I found shocked me to my core. Beneath their veneer of success, my parents were financially ruined. My father had made a series of disastrous investments, leveraging their home and retirement accounts on high-risk ventures that had collapsed. They were 3 months behind on the mortgage, their credit cards were maxed out, and they had taken loans from several of the very people who had attended my graduation party. Then I found the life insurance policy, a $3 million policy on me, taken out when I started college but substantially increased just 2 months ago. The beneficiaries were, of course, my parents. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. They weren't just trying to eliminate a disappointment. They were trying to cash in on my death to solve their financial problems. The elaborate party wasn't a celebration of my achievement, but a public establishment of their loving parent credentials before my mysterious and tragic death. I photographed everything, carefully documenting each damning piece of evidence. In my mother's desk, I found a journal where she had actually outlined their financial concerns, mentioning the insurance policy as a last resort if other avenues failed. "Harold says it would solve everything," she had written. "Clean slate. Fresh start. Sometimes sacrifices must be made for the family." The casual way she discussed my murder made me physically ill. I rushed to the bathroom, retching as the full reality of their betrayal hit me. As I washed my face, trying to regain my composure, I heard the front door open. Freezing in panic, I checked my watch. They were back hours earlier than expected. "Amber?" Uncle Travis's voice called out. "Your car's outside. Are you here?" Relief flooded through me. "Upstairs," I called back. "I'll be right down." Uncle Travis was standing in the foyer, concern evident on his face. "I stopped by to see if you wanted to grab coffee, but your parents said you were out with friends when I called their cell. Then I drove past and saw your car." The lie my parents had told him, one of many, I now realized, was further confirmation of their guilt. Without conscious decision, I found myself confiding in Uncle Travis, showing him the evidence I had gathered and explaining the poisoning attempt. Unlike Derek and Kayla, who had been shocked into near disbelief, Travis's expression shifted from concern to grim understanding. "I've always known my sister was capable of cruelty," he said quietly. "But this..." He shook his head, examining the financial documents. "Actually, this explains some things. Sylvia called me last month asking for a loan, a substantial one. When I asked why, she became evasive. I declined, and she hasn't spoken to me since." His validation of my discoveries strengthened my resolve. "I need to get out of here before they return," I said, gathering the evidence I had collected. I'm not sure what to do next, but I can't stay in this house. You'll stay with me, Uncle Travis insisted. My apartment has a guest room, and they'd never expect you to be there given the current tension between your mother and me. We can figure out next steps once you're safe. As we prepared to leave, my phone pinged with a message from Derek. Analysis confirmed. Lethal dose of cyanide. Professor is willing to provide official testimony. Call me ASAP. With this final piece of evidence, I now had everything I needed to confront my parents and ensure they never had the opportunity to harm me again. For 3 days, I stayed with Uncle Travis while we formulated a plan. Derek's professor had provided a detailed toxicology report confirming the presence of potassium cyanide in the drink samples, a substance my father had access to through his company's manufacturing connections. The financial records clearly established motive, and my mother's journal provided damning evidence of premeditation. During this time, my parents bombarded me with increasingly frantic texts and calls, their messages evolving from casual inquiries about my whereabouts to thinly veiled threats disguised as concern. "We're worried about you, Amber," my father's latest voicemail stated. "You haven't been yourself lately. Perhaps the stress of graduation has affected your health. We've scheduled an appointment with Dr. Winters for tomorrow. We insist you come home immediately. Dr. Winters was their personal physician, a golf buddy of my father's who had always been suspiciously willing to prescribe whatever medications my parents suggested I needed. The implied threat was clear. If poison hadn't worked, they would attempt to have me declared mentally unstable. "We need to move quickly," I told Derek, Kayla, and Uncle Travis as we gathered in his apartment to finalize our strategy. "They're escalating." With the help of Kayla's mother, who was a partner at a prestigious law firm, I had secured legal representation and filed for an emergency restraining order against my parents. Derek's professor had connected us with a detective in the Major Crimes Division who wasn't part of my father's social network. All the pieces were in place for a confrontation. "Are you sure you want to confront them directly?" my lawyer, Ms. Hendricks, asked during our final planning session. "We have enough evidence to go directly to the police. I need to face them," I explained. "Not just for closure, but because I know my parents. They're master manipulators who have fooled everyone for years. If I don't confront them directly, they'll find a way to spin this, to paint me as unstable or attention-seeking." The plan we devised was carefully structured to minimize risk while maximizing the chance of obtaining additional evidence. The confrontation would take place at my parents' home, but with significant safeguards. Uncle Travis and Derek would accompany me, Kayla and Ms. Hendricks would wait outside with the detective, and most importantly, everyone would be wearing concealed recording devices. The day of the confrontation arrived with a strange sense of calm. The fear and shock that had dominated the past week had crystallized into a cold, clear determination. These people had tried to kill me for money. They had spent my entire life manipulating and controlling me. Today, that ended. We arrived at the house at precisely 2 p.m., when I knew both parents would be home but not expecting visitors. Derek parked a block away, and we approached on foot to prevent them from seeing his car and growing suspicious. I rang the doorbell, standing between Derek and Uncle Travis as we waited. When my mother opened the door, her initial expression of surprise quickly shifted to a calculated smile. "Amber, we've been so worried. And, Travis? This is unexpected." Her eyes hardened when she noticed Derek. "I'm afraid we're not prepared for guests." "This isn't a social call," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "We need to talk. All of us." Without waiting for permission, I walked past her into the house, Derek and Uncle Travis following closely. My father emerged from his office, his face registering alarm before settling into a careful neutrality. "Amber, where have you been? We've been trying to reach you for days." "I know exactly what you've been trying to do," I said, moving to the living room where we could all sit facing each other. "Let's not waste time pretending. I know about the poison in my graduation drink." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents exchanged a quick glance, the kind of wordless communication they had perfected over decades of shared secrets. "Poison," my mother finally said, forcing a laugh. What are you talking about? Harold, I think Amber might be having some kind of episode. I tested the drink, Mother, I replied calmly, placing the toxicology report on the coffee table between us. Potassium cyanide. A lethal dose. The same substance Dad's company uses in their metal plating process. My father's expression darkened. This is absurd. You've always had an active imagination, Amber, but this is beyond acceptable. Travis, I'm surprised at you for encouraging this delusion. It's no delusion, Harold, Uncle Travis replied grimly. I've seen the evidence myself. I proceeded methodically, laying out the financial records, the insurance policy, and copies of my mother's journal entries. With each piece of evidence, my parents' denials became less convincing, their composed facades beginning to crack. You're completely misinterpreting everything, my father insisted, though his voice had lost its authoritative edge. The insurance policy is standard practice for parents. The financial documents are being taken out of context. And the journal? I asked, turning to my mother. Harold says it would solve everything. Clean slate. Fresh start. What exactly did you mean by that, Mom? You had no right to read my private thoughts, she snapped, her carefully cultivated poise evaporating. Those were therapeutic writings. Fiction, essentially. A way to process stress. Fiction that perfectly aligns with attempting to poison your daughter at her graduation party. Derek interjected, his tone reflecting barely controlled anger. My mother's eyes flashed with hatred as she turned to him. You. This is your influence, isn't it? Turning our daughter against us with these wild accusations. Derek didn't turn me against you, I said quietly. You did that all by yourselves. I just finally opened my eyes to who you really are. What followed was a masterclass in manipulation as my parents cycled through their entire repertoire: denial, gaslighting, victim playing, and, when those failed, attempts to rewrite history. We've given you everything, my father declared, abandoning denial for righteousness. Everything. And this is how you repay us? With accusations and betrayal. You tried to poison me, I stated flatly. For insurance money. Because you're broke and desperate. We are not broke. My mother hissed, inadvertently acknowledging the rest of my statement. The slip wasn't lost on any of us. My father's strategy shifted instantly. Amber, you're clearly unwell, he said, his voice suddenly gentle with fabricated concern. First the stress of graduation, then this bizarre fixation. We only want to help you. Come home, let us take care of you, and we'll forget this unfortunate incident. Like you forgot putting cyanide in my drink? I challenged. I'm not coming back, Dad. Ever. But I am giving you one chance to tell me the truth. One chance to explain how my own parents could try to murder me. Perhaps it was the realization that their manipulations weren't working. Perhaps it was simply the accumulation of stress and fear. Whatever the trigger, my mother suddenly snapped. You ungrateful little bitch, she spat, rising to her feet. You've been nothing but a disappointment from the day you were born. Do you have any idea what we've sacrificed for you? The opportunities we've lost? The life we could have had without you dragging us down. Sylvia, my father warned, but the dam had broken. We gave you everything, the best schools, the best opportunities, and you threw it all away. Northwestern instead of Harvard. Biochemistry instead of law or medicine. That scholarship boy instead of the Whitmore heir who was practically handed to you on a silver platter. I remained calm, letting her rant while the recording devices captured every word. So you decided to kill me for the insurance money. We decided to cut our losses, she shouted. You were supposed to be our legacy, our investment. Instead, you became a liability. My father grabbed her arm. Sylvia, stop talking. Now. But she was beyond his control. It was your idea, Harold. One drink, you said. Quick, painless, and we're free. Don't you dare pretend this wasn't your plan all along. The room fell silent as my father's face contorted with fury. In that moment, the mask fell completely, revealing the cold, calculating man beneath. If you had just done as you were told, he said quietly, menacingly, none of this would have been necessary. A simple drink. A tragic accident. We would have mourned appropriately, collected the insurance, and moved on. Everyone would have been better off. Including me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You would never have known, he replied, and the casual cruelty of his response chilled me to the bone. Uncle Travis had heard enough. He stood up, positioning himself between me and my parents. I think we have everything we need, he said, his normally jovial face hardened with disgust. Amber, Derek, let's go. As if on cue, the front door opened, and Detective Rodriguez entered with Ms. Hendricks and Kayla. My parents' expressions shifted from rage to shock as they realized the full extent of the trap they had walked into. Harold and Sylvia Mitchell, the detective announced formally, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Amber Mitchell. You have the right to remain silent. As they were led away in handcuffs, my mother turned to me one last time. You'll regret this, she said, her voice eerily calm once more. No one will believe you. We'll make sure of it. But looking at her now, her perfect mask cracked beyond repair, the malevolence fully exposed, I felt something unexpected: pity. These broken, desperate people had spent their lives constructing an elaborate facade of success and respectability, and now it had all crumbled to dust. Goodbye, Mother, I said simply, turning away from her hatred and toward the supportive circle of people who represented my true family, the one I had chosen for myself. 6 months passed after my parents' arrest, each day a step in my journey toward healing and reclaiming my life. The legal proceedings moved forward with methodical precision, faced with overwhelming evidence, including their recorded confessions. My parents ultimately accepted a plea deal rather than face a public trial that would have exposed the full extent of their crimes and financial fraud. My father received 15 years for attempted murder and financial crimes, while my mother received 12 sentences that their former social circle found shocking, but that seemed almost inadequate to me given what they had tried to do. Throughout this period, I immersed myself in therapy, working with Dr. Langley, a specialist in family trauma, to process not just the poisoning attempt, but the lifetime of manipulation and emotional abuse that had preceded it. What you're experiencing is complex trauma, Dr. Langley explained during one of our sessions. Your parents violated the most fundamental trust relationship possible, that between parent and child. Healing from that violation will take time. And it did take time. There were nights when I woke up gasping, dreaming of bitter almond smells and blue drinks. There were days when I questioned my own memories, wondering if perhaps I had misinterpreted everything. A testament to how deeply my parents' gaslighting had affected me. But I wasn't alone in my healing journey. Derek had deferred his first semester of medical school to help me settle into my new life, finding us a modest but comfortable apartment in Cambridge close to my new job at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. Kayla visited regularly from Chicago, where she had started her own career. And Uncle Travis had become the supportive family figure I had always needed, checking in daily and hosting Sunday dinners that became a cherished weekly tradition. With their help, I gradually transformed our apartment into a true home, something I had never really experienced before. We painted the walls in warm colors, filled bookshelves with novels and scientific journals, and created a space where I felt safe and valued. I never had photos displayed in my parents' house unless they served their social narrative, I told Derek as we hung framed pictures of our friends, graduation, and weekend adventures. It's strange to see my actual life represented on these walls. This is just the beginning, he promised, squeezing my hand. We're building something real here. My work at Vertex became another cornerstone of my recovery. I had always loved biochemistry, but now my research into pharmaceutical compounds took on new meaning. I requested assignment to a project developing antidotes for rare poisons, channeling my traumatic experience into potentially life-saving work. Your analytical skills are exceptional, my supervisor commented during my first performance review. Especially your attention to detail and toxin identification. I've had some relevant personal experience, I replied with a wry smile, having shared a sanitized version of my story with close colleagues. 3 months after my parents' sentencing, I faced another challenge, delivering a victim impact statement at their formal sentencing hearing. I had debated whether to attend at all, but Dr. Langley suggested that confronting them from a position of strength might be a powerful step in my healing process. Standing at the podium in the hushed courtroom, facing the parents who had tried to kill me, I felt a strange sense of calm. The worst part wasn't the poisoning attempt itself, I told the court, my voice steady. It was realizing that the people who should have loved me most in the world had only seen me as an investment, then a liability, and finally as a potential source of cash through my death. That kind of betrayal doesn't leave a single wound that can heal neatly. It fractures your entire understanding of love, family, and trust. My parents sat expressionless, already distancing themselves from the consequences of their actions. My mother had styled her hair carefully despite her prison jumpsuit, maintaining appearances to the bitter end. But despite what they did, I am still here, I continued. I am building a career helping others. I am creating a chosen family based on genuine love and support. I am refusing to let their betrayal define my future or corrupt my capacity to trust. That is my victory over what they tried to take from me, not just my life, but my ability to live it fully. When I finished speaking, Uncle Travis and Derek enveloped me in a group hug outside the courtroom. For the first time since the poisoning, I felt like I could finally exhale completely. "I'm proud of you, kiddo," Uncle Travis said, his eyes glistening. "So damn proud." As the months passed, I channeled my experience into helping others, volunteering with an organization supporting young adults from toxic family environments. Every Saturday morning, I met with a group of college students who were navigating educational achievements without family support, sharing resources and strategies I wished I had known years earlier. How do you know if you're making the right choices when the people who raised you have such warped perspectives? Asked Madison, a brilliant physics student whose parents had similarly viewed her as property rather than a person. You build a new framework, I told her. You find mentors and friends whose values align with yours, and you practice listening to your own instincts. It takes time, but eventually, your own voice becomes louder than theirs in your head. My professional life flourished alongside my personal healing. By the end of my first year at Vertex, I had been promoted to research associate and was contributing to 2 patent applications. Derek was thriving in medical school, often studying at our dining table while I reviewed research papers. We had created a partnership based on mutual respect and support, the antithesis of what I had observed in my parents' marriage. On the anniversary of the graduation party, I decided to host a different kind of celebration. A chosen family dinner bringing together the people who had supported me through the darkest year of my life. Uncle Travis, Kayla, Derek, Dr. Fernandez, who had flown in from Chicago, my therapy group facilitator, and several colleagues gathered in our apartment for a meal that represented everything my parents' elaborate party had not. Genuine connection, unconditional support, and authentic celebration of growth. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, raising my glass of sparkling cider. None of us drank blue cocktails anymore. "To choosing your own path and your own people. To building something real from something broken. And to all of you who showed me what family is supposed to be." As we clinked glasses, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The parents who had tried to poison me were serving their sentences, their social facade shattered beyond repair. Meanwhile, I was thriving. Not despite their betrayal, but because overcoming it had revealed my own strength. Later that night, after our guests had departed, Derek found me on our small balcony, looking at the Cambridge skyline. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders against the spring chill. "I was just thinking about how far I've come," I replied, leaning into his embrace. A year ago, I nearly died at what was supposed to be a celebration of my achievements. Tonight, I hosted a genuine celebration surrounded by people who actually care about me. It feels like completion of a circle. "Not completion," Derek corrected gently. "Just the beginning of a new one. A better one." He was right, of course. The future stretched before me, a future I had nearly lost, but now cherished with newfound appreciation. I had discovered that sometimes the family we choose is more precious than the one we're born into, that true strength comes from surviving the unimaginable and that the best revenge against those who tried to destroy you is to build a beautiful life despite their efforts. As I looked out at the city lights, I felt gratitude for this second chance at life, not the life my parents had tried to force me into, but the authentic one I was creating for myself, day by day, choice by choice. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey, it's that recognizing your worth is the most powerful act of rebellion when those who should love you don't. Sometimes the people who are supposed to nurture you are the ones who cause the most harm, but that doesn't diminish your value or your right to happiness. Have you ever had to make difficult choices to protect your well-being from toxic family members? How did you rebuild trust and create boundaries? Your experiences matter, and sharing them might help others facing similar challenges. Leave a comment below, subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and healing, and remember that family is sometimes who you choose, not who you're born to. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that even in the darkest moments, there is always a path forward toward light and healing.